Good afternoon, everyone. This is Yolanda Hinton, your host of FYI After Dark. Our co-host, Edward Everett, is going to join us in a little while. I tell you what, I need you all to hold on just about 30 seconds because we're going to pull in our Instagram viewers. Good evening again. I'm Yolanda Hinton, your host of FYI After Dark. And we are so glad to be here this evening. We have a great topic. Before we do, I want to welcome our listeners and viewers. Our platforms are Facebook Live, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram. And I'd like to also welcome our sponsors, Bulvic Academy, BULVIC Academy.com, and beardgods.com, BEARDGODZ. Make sure you visit the websites. Great information at Bulvic, our anti-bullying initiative. There are books there, there are games, plenty of information for teachers, students, for the school system about our anti-bullying initiative. I got books out there on that website as well. The Diary of a Former Bully, and bullying is right underneath your nose, along with a wonderful game that I just put together. It's an app, and it's called Bulvic, BULVIC. You can buy it on the Android, Google Play Android, and you can also go to your Apple iPhone and get that game Bulvic. Great information to share with your children, teaching them what bullying is, why people bully, and some of our remedies, some of the things we can do to stop bullying. So we are so glad to be here. I have a very special guest. We've been waiting for him for the longest time. Actually, we've been introducing the topic of immigration for quite some time. Our special guest is attorney John VASQUEZ. I love that name. And I want to say good evening to you, John.
Good evening, Yolanda. Good evening to all your listeners out there and your guests and everybody watching. I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to come and spend some time with you on your show.
Thank you. John, please tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey as an attorney and how you got to where you are as a specialist in immigration.
Sure. Well, I grew up in a Navy family. My father was a retired senior chief, kind of lived all over the place, but we settled here in Norfolk. So I grew up here in Norfolk. Went to VMI, actually, graduated from VMI, and then I spent almost 25 years in the Marine Corps. And I wasn't a lawyer in the Marine Corps. I was actually an infantry guy. Did my share of tours all around the world. Did 3 combat tours in Iraq, Afghanistan. Then I retired from the Marine Corps, and I actually decided to try something different. And I decided to become a lawyer, and I went to law school, partly because a lot of influence from my wife, who was an accountant, who had the majority of her clients were from Latin America, but also my own experiences working overseas, and working with foreign nations, getting to know them, and then especially really working a lot in Central and South America towards the end of my career. So it was an itch I had for a long time. Originally, my family's from Cuba, and I come from a family of lawyers. So I decided to give law school a try. I went to University of Miami School of Law, graduated. Now I'm here at Protégé Law and been practicing here for a while, and I do primarily criminal defense, but a lot of immigration law as well. So we're a primary defense firm, and I just stick to immigration mainly and criminal defense. And that's how I ended up here. So still live in this area, still love the area, came back from Miami and decided to stay here and practice.
Well, glad you did. And we're glad you're here to talk about immigration. We're interested to know what immigration is and why is it such a hot topic now?
Well, It's funny, Yolanda. It's been a crazy few months, I would think, with immigration law. It was busy before the election. It's really gotten busy. But I guess if I can give kind of a general overview to immigration law is probably one of the most complex fields of law, believe it or not. Between tax law and immigration law, there's kind of a competition which one is more complicated. But the immigration laws really haven't changed as much as people might think. The original Immigration and Nationality Act was written. There was a version that was written in 1952. Then there was a version in 1964. And that's pretty much the one we have now. There's been a couple of updates. There was an update, a big one in 1996. But the immigration laws are kind of they're on the books. The difference now is they're really enforcing them. And a lot of times with immigration law, it's what we call administrative law. How do you enforce it? Well, we have regulations that help to enforce the immigration laws. So the immigration laws might not change, but the regulations, those are the ones
Yes.
really what can have an effect. And we I like to use the analogy of imagine a police officer, sitting up on Interstate 64 and 100 people go by and they're all speeding and he pulls over like two. Now the same scenario, he pulls over 100 and maybe he pulls over 102 two people,
Yes.
but he pulls them over anyway. So a lot of the laws you're seeing out there, they've existed for a long time. We just haven't really enforced them that much.
Wow.
The way we're interpreting them now, the executive branch kind of can do things to not interpret them, but enforce them a little bit differently based on changes to regulations. I hope that was not too complicated, but
That's absolutely
like
excellent. And I want to know why now we have a new administration. People are a little nervous. They see a lot more of it. I mean, we've always seen, the border and things like that and talk. But now, like you said, the laws seem like they are in our face and people are wondering, how it affects them. What's the difference between the last administration and this one? Why are they a little bit harder on, the law? Why are they making the laws out there a little bit more than it was?
That's a great question, and some of it goes back to just kind of enforcement. If there's certain laws that, yes, now we're going to enforce those laws. And I would tell you that one thing that hasn't changed is you will, if you come to the United States, you come across the border and you say, I fear going back to my country. I would like to request asylum. And if at the border you can make it through that process, because there's things that can happen there. There's programs called expedited removal where they could deport you within a couple of weeks if they don't think your fear is credible.
Yes.
But basically, if you're in the country and you've requested asylum, you will get your day in court. That you will get to see an immigration judge. You will get to present your case. Now, you might be. Is there a possibility you could be detained and go through that process? That is a possibility. But I can tell you the amount of bed spaces they have for non-criminal illegal immigrants that are here, they're just here requesting asylum. They want to work, whatever. They haven't committed any crimes other than crossing the border. They're probably not going to be detained. They might have to check in with ICE, but they're going to get their day in court. And that process is a long process. I will tell you this, that the amount of people that were requesting asylum, and the system was overwhelmed, but how many judges are there? I think it's about 700 immigration judges, and I think I heard a number that said each judge has about anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 cases.
Yes.
And you figure it just takes a while to get through the system. So the laws are still there. You're still going to get your day in court, but what's happening now is, for example, criminal cases. Like I have some clients in criminal that they don't have legal status, but they're also being pending criminal charges. Almost a guarantee now that when they walk out of jail, there'll be an ICE detainer and they'll be picked up by Immigration and Customs Enforcement. That used to never happen. It used to maybe happen in Virginia Beach, but everywhere else they could pretty much count on walking out and there was nobody there. And the biggest one is DUIs. Before you get a DUI, whether you got to serve a jail sentence, a mandatory 5 days or 10 days, you're probably going to walk out of jail and go home. Now it's almost a guarantee that ICE will be waiting for you.
Oh, wow. Can you tell us about those seeking asylum? What's their story? I mean, especially those that say they're running for their lives. Tell us what it is behind their walls. What is it like?
Great. It's a great question. And that's one of the misconceptions. I get a lot of clients that come in, they want to request asylum. And asylum is a law, is an international law. It's an international concept, if you will, that somebody comes to your border, they want to request asylum in the United States. And the United States is welcoming. Believe it or not, the standard is actually, 10 to 20%. If there's a 10 to 20% chance that they're going to, to put a number on it, that
Yes.
they're going to face persecution if they have to return to their country, that's a reason to grant them asylum. But here's the hard part, Yolanda, is that your fear of persecution has to be based on a protected class. And we call that the nexus. You have the persecution, and it has to be related to the protected class. And there's 5 protected classes. It's race, religion,
Yes.
national origin, political opinion, or a particular social group. For example, certain countries have anti-homosexual laws, and again, against homosexual conduct. That, and if a person is gay, that's a protected class.
Yes.
Or there's all kinds of different protected classes, and and there's some that you have to make a case to the court. Hey, my client belongs to that protected class. But if it's not one of those 5 reasons, and I can tell you what's not: economics. Hey,
Wow.
there's no jobs where I live. That's not a protected class. Crime. Hey, it's really dangerous where I live. There's a lot of crime. That's not a protected class by the law, because they say, hey, well, if you come from, let's say you come from Mexico, well, Mexico has a police force, they have a military, they have a functioning economy, a functioning government. That doesn't qualify. And so the hard part for immigration lawyers is, how do we tie that persecution to a protected class? And as a lawyer, I tell my clients, we're not gonna make anything up. We're just gonna tell the truth. But tell me why you feel you were persecuted. And I'm very honest with my clients. Hey, I don't think
Yes.
you came here for a job. That's wonderful and great. This is a great country for that, but it's not a protected class. So asylum has to be based on one of those, and you have to prove it to the court that your persecution is based on one of those protected classes. And that's, even though I say it's like 10 to 20%,
Yes.
that there's a chance you'll be persecuted
Yes.
because of that class, it's sometimes that summit that seems like Mount Everest to get up to that 10 to 20%.
Why the USA? Why does everybody want to come to the USA, honey?
Well, let me take off my lawyer hat and put on my Marine hat, put on my immigrant hat. I would say I'm the child. I'm a child of immigrants. My parents came here from Cuba in the late 1950s, and having seen the rest of the world, whether it was in war or regular deployments or traveling, I'm I love this country, and it gave so many opportunities to my family. My father came over here with very little. My mother came over here with very little, and they were able to put us all through, get a good education, put us through college, my brothers and sisters. And so it's the opportunity to come here and to, for freedom, and to be able to work, and to be able to, to be rewarded for hard work, and to be rewarded. Just, so many of my clients, they just want an opportunity. They go, just give me a chance. And I think, we've had all this, if you see the news, it would just depress you, whether
Yes.
whatever you're watching. But sometimes you got to take a step back and go, this, for all our faults, this really is a great country, or we wouldn't have so many people trying to break down the doors to get here.
Yes. Absolutely. I want to know your experience when you have clients. What are some of the things that they want, or what are some of the things that you say in order to, assure them that the process that they will go through the process, and not that you guarantee them citizenship, but what things do you tell your clients?
So, great question, Yolanda. And that is, when I meet with my clients, we start off, and I always say, I just want to hear, what can I help you with, and what's your goals? I always tell them, what do you want? Because I get so many clients a lot of times, whether it's an immigration case or a criminal case or a civil case, and finally I just say, what do you want?
Yes.
Do you want to, in very simple terms, but hey, do you want somebody to stop something? Do you want money? Do you feel like you should be? And immigration's no different. Why did you come here? A lot of times I'll ask them, why did you come here? But I will tell them up front, I'll say, hey, they'll come in, the first thing they'll say is asylum, or they'll say in Spanish, they'll say asilo. And I'll say, okay, here's the 5 reasons and think about that, because I said, as a lawyer, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to make stuff up. We're not going to embellish. We're just going to put the facts down as to why you came over here. But I talk them through the process. A lot of times they just want to know what the process is.
Yes.
And to be honest with you, a lot of them, a lot of them know they might not have a very good case for asylum, or they don't have any remedy, but they say, okay, what can I do? And how much time do I have? And how long do you think that'll take? A lot of them. And I'll try to explain how the process works as far as applications, as far as, what will make a stronger application if they can get more evidence. A lot of times it's hard to collect evidence because clients are coming from foreign countries. But I talk to them very honestly about their case, and I'll tell them, hey, I don't think you have a very good case.
Wow.
Sometimes I say, hey, I think you have a good case. And then I walk them through, here's the benefits. We can still apply, but here's the benefits and the downside, and here's the pros and the cons of the case. But I always try to be very upfront with my clients and tell them, here's really the legal options.
Yes.
And if I have a client say, well, I have somebody that said that they'll get married to me, I'll say, hey, thank you for coming by, but I can't represent you. And I've done that many times. I've said, hey, I know somebody that will marry me, and to help me get, and I said, well, it's very nice to meet you, and I can't help you, I'm sorry, and send them on their way. So
Absolutely.
very upfront. The biggest thing is to try to be very honest with my clients and tell them, hey, here's your options, and whether they're good or not. And then I ultimately just make my recommendations, and then let them make the decision.
The reality to me is that, of course, we have people that are wanting to come in, they want to go through the process, but there are people that have been here and they did not go through the process. Tell us about those people. Are they nervous, afraid? Are there anybody that you talk with or know of that family members are here and they just, they just got here, but not by the legal means? How do you deal with those people that are coming forth to you now?
Absolutely, Yolanda. I deal with that all the time. A lot of people, especially after the election, I got a lot of calls from people very nervous. And the immigration process, as you know, the cases take very long.
Wow.
And so, I mean, there's some cases that take 10, 15 years to adjudicate. And it's just by the volume. I will tell you that the government, the ones that, I've talked to, USCIS agents, and I've talked to the court, and they're work. A lot of them are working as fast as they can. And although they're on the other side, what I found is a lot of them they're trying to do the right thing. They're trying to do their jobs as well. But I tell them, I said, you're going to get your day in court. If you have an immigration case, you're going to get your day in court. I tell them too, let's not break the law, because the biggest, I can't tell you how many clients I get for speeding tickets or driving without a license.
Wow.
Those are all, speeding tickets, one thing, but if it's a reckless driving ticket or driving without a license, that's a class 2 misdemeanor or class 1 misdemeanor. That means you have to go to court. There's a possibility of jail time.
Yes.
And, Virginia is one of the only 31 states that gives illegal immigrants driver's license.
Wow.
So I say, take advantage of it. What other state can there's not many, there's more states, but none of them are, if you go south, there aren't any south, DC, Maryland, yes. But take advantage of being in Virginia and get a driver's license. But I try to tell my clients is if you stay out of trouble, just live your life, do your job, you'll be fine. Most immigrants, even if they're in an unlawful status, most of them have tax ID numbers. They pay taxes.
Right.
They may have work permits. Their kids are in school. I mean, they're members of our community. I can't advocate for anybody to break the law, but I tell my clients, or I tell clients, I said, hey, just keep living your life, but you don't want to get in any trouble. And I encourage them to use the legal process. If they've been here if they've been here a certain amount of times, there's other remedies out there. There's remedies. There's a law that's called the cancellation of removal for people that have been here longer than 10 years. It has very specific requirements, but there are people that might qualify. There's things we can discuss. But the biggest thing, as I say, hey, try to, just continue to live your life, but, try not to break the law. I will tell you this, Yolanda, I haven't seen it here, but I have heard, and I hate to say, I hate to bring up hearsay, but I have, talking to USCIS officials, I've heard of checkpoints up north, maybe up in Northern Virginia, that there's some checkpoints checking people's immigration status. I have not seen it personally. I have not seen it down here. And I tell you, when my clients run into trouble all the time, it's because of a criminal offense
Yes,
that has a immigration consequence on the backside of that.
absolutely. Can you tell us about ICE? We're hearing about ICE, ICE, ICE. We've been hearing about it for a while, but tell us about them and how you all work. Do you work along with them? How does it? How do you all bring things together and make
Yeah,
things?
so that's a great question. I mean, basically, ICE is the enforcement arm of of the immigration and custom. It's immigration and customs enforcement, and they have the what's called the enforcement and removal operations section too. Um, but every prosecutor, we call them prosecutors. They're called ACCs, associate chief counsels, or assistant chief counsels. They're basically the prosecutors for Homeland Security, and they fall under ICE. They're lawyers. They're very hardworking. They are completely overwhelmed. And I've actually had good working relationships with them. Just like everybody, they have a job to do, and they've worked with me on times on getting cases dismissed.
Mhm.
For the most part, they're very fair, but they've
Wow.
got a pretty tough. They've got a pretty tough mandate, and I say they're fair, but the laws are tough.
Yes.
If you go by the letter of the law, so many clients just don't meet those requirements. And so that's my primary dealing with ICE is the attorneys. As far as there are my clients that have to check in with ICE, like into the local ICE office.
Yes.
And I would tell you that matter of fact, all the ones that I've dealt with, they come in, they check in with ICE, and then they leave. And they'll call me, "Hey, should I check in?" I said, "Absolutely," because if you don't check in, now they have a reason to detain you because you might be a flight risk, or hey, you're not going to check in. So from my experience, I'm not saying this for everybody. My
Yes.
experience with my clients, they go check in with ICE. They've sometimes I'll have like a camera. They used to give them cameras or phones. They'd have to check in, take a selfie, send their geolocation, stuff like that.
Yes.
But I've had pretty good. I mean, they've been pretty good here. I have dealt with ICE personally over here in the Norfolk field office, where now it's hard to get through when you're dealing with some of these agencies. It's hard to
Yes.
get to talk to a real person, but they're pretty good when I use their contact system. I had a client with an ankle monitor, and she was tiny. The ankle monitor was only almost half the size of her leg. By
Oh,
the time I finally got through and talked to the ICE agents, went over there, had a big brief prepared on why they should take it out. They were the nicest people like you could imagine. I couldn't. They were very professional. Like, oh my god, yeah, let's take that off. Now I'd kind of made I'd been badgering them. I think once a week I was putting in a contact and asking them to review it. But when I went, they were very professional. There are some frustrating moments, don't get me
mhm.
wrong, and dealing with ICE. But my primary dealing with ICE is through their prosecutors. I don't deal too much with the
With them.
enforcement,
Okay.
the enforcement and removal operations arms of them. So
The media, are they scaring us? We have people that are citizens that are scared. What is the media's role in this? Do you think they're painting the right picture?
I would say it depends on who you ask and what you watch. I think if you watch certain channels, you'll get a completely different perspective on it. I think it depends on the community too. I'll give you an example. The big case in the media has been this
Yes, Garcia.
gentleman from Maryland, and he was under a program that's called withholding of removal, and they've talked about that
Oh,
a lot. And
okay.
basically, withholding of removal, when you apply for asylum, the asylum, if you're granted asylum, that eventually leads to permanent residency and can eventually lead to citizenship.
Yes.
So asylum is the best remedy. But in the alternative, if an immigration judge says, "I don't think you warrant asylum, but I do think that it's more likely than not that you would be persecuted if you're returned to your home country. So I'm going to give you an order of deportation, but I'm going to withhold it." It's called
Yes.
withholding of removal. And basically, what the government is saying is, we think you might get harmed if you go back to your home country.
Mhm.
So here's what we're going to do: we're going to withhold it. However, we can either one, deport you to a third country,
Wow.
or two, if things change in your home country, we can send you back to your home country. That was the part you'd never hear about on any of the
Yes.
media. You would hear about, hey, we can send you to a third country, Canada, maybe the UK, or we can send you back to your home country if it's changed. I
Yes.
would argue, having done many tours in El Salvador, working with the Salvadorian Marines. I spent a lot of time there as a Marine working over there. Things have drastically changed. My
Wow.
wife is Salvadorian, and she just went back for a wedding, and could not
Oh, that's
imagine
marvelous.
how things have changed. So you could argue that okay, he could be deported to a third country, but you never hear them saying, yeah, he could be deported back to his home country. However,
Yes,
what hasn't been done is if they are going to bring him back and say, hey, things have changed in your home country, the threat that was there before no longer exists, so now we can deport you, we can remove that withholding and deport you. But there's a process for that.
hmm
There'd have to be a hearing to, normally. I will be honest, Yolanda, I have never seen it. Usually when a client gets withholding, they're in this kind of quasi state of they're legal, they can't
yeah,
be deported, they can get a work permit, and a lot of them that's a pretty good deal because they don't they're not going to live with that cloud of deportation. And I've never seen it where a country improves so much that they could be deported back to their country until
absolutely,
now.
absolutely.
With that one specific country. So technically he could be deported back to El Salvador, but they'd have to there'd be some type of a adjudication process to say, hey buddy, everything's better in El Salvador, we're going to send you back. And I don't
Absolutely.
think that happened. Yeah. So, but
Wow.
it depends on the media side, depends on which one you're watching, and then
Okay.
communities look at things so different. If it's an immigrant community, if it's not an immigrant community, you'd be amazed. Immigrant communities sometimes are not pro immigrant, depending on where you are. So it's just amazed. It's just so different wherever you are.
Are you educating us in Hampton Roads? Is Hampton Roads asking more questions now that we are under a new administration? What's happening here, right here?
Here locally, Yolanda, I think the biggest change is obviously in the courts where we're seeing ICE detainers across the board. I mean, in every jurisdiction. Like I said, usually when I was practicing probably 2 to 3 years ago, the only time you'd see an ICE detainer was maybe in Virginia Beach.
Ah,
And even those were relatively rare, but I did have a few clients that were, and it's usually a DUI. They'd have a mandatory 5 days in jail. They usually do 2 days in jail. When they walked out, there was ICE waiting for them.
yes. Ooh,
But even that was not very common. But now they're in Norfolk, Hampton, Virginia Beach. They're working with the jails, and some of them, a lot of them, I may feel, my clients. I want the best for my clients, and I'll tell them, my client may be being released on bond, and I'll tell them, hey, there's a good chance ICE is going to be waiting for you. Legal, there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing I can do about it. Hopefully they won't be there, but if they are there, then we'll deal with that. That's an immigration issue as well. So from a local perspective, that's the biggest change. But I deal with police officers all the time when I do my criminal cases, and I
yes.
can tell you none of them, I get a lot of driving without a license because a lot of immigrants don't have their license and they get pulled over for speeding, expired registration, no inspection, whatever, regular, and then they don't have a driver's license. And that's a class 2 misdemeanor for the first offense, class 1 after that. And that could be jail time. But I have yet to deal with any police officers that are like actively saying, oh, he looks like he's an immigrant, let me pull him over.
Oh,
They're just doing their job, as the best they can.
oh, no profiling that you know of. They're not doing that.
Yeah, not that I've seen, not here, at least that I've seen from my
Okay.
perspective. Every one of my police officers is that I deal with, I call them up, that I deal with, they're hey, I stopped him for this, I stopped him for that. And the question that judges always ask, and I'll always ask, hey, how was my client? Was he polite, cooperative? And I would say 99% of my clients, the police officer said, oh yeah, nice guy, polite, cooperative, didn't speak English, but I had no problems with him. So I haven't seen any kind of targeting or profiling or anything like that.
So the job in itself, is it a heavy load or is the load heavier now? How do you manage this type of job? It seems like it's a lot.
It has, it's been a bit, it's been a lot. There's been a lot more lately. I would say that the administrative requirements in immigration law, as far as filling out forms and making sure your briefs are, whenever I have an asylum hearing up in, basically that's the trial where it's, me and my client, there's a prosecutor and the judge. They're basically all bench trials. There's no juries involved. And we present evidence just like we would, I present my case for my client, rates asylum. I can call witnesses and everything. And then the defense does cross-examination. And then the judge asks a lot of questions, and then he makes a decision, and it can be appealed. It's an appeal. So it's very similar to a regular court process. But I'll say this, the administrative process, like my briefs are due to the immigration court between 15 to 30 days prior.
Yeah.
And those briefs, Yolanda, are between 100 and 150 pages
Wow.
with all my evidence and, statements, personal statements. If I've got evidence from the country's articles, country condition briefs from State Department. So it's a hefty package that goes up. And luckily I do now have I have a paralegal who works with me on that, and he helps me prepare my clients. We prepare them just like we would for any other trial. So that there are some heavy administrative requirements that you might not see in criminal cases. And it has been overwhelming. Sometimes we got to kind of put the brakes and say, hey, we can't take any more.
Yes.
There are not a lot of immigration attorneys in this area. I know a few out there, and and the ones that I know of are good. They've been doing it for a long time. They're very good. I know of some in Virginia Beach that are good. And I think all of us are kind of like, whoa,
Yes.
the volume of work that's come in is pretty significant. I think I'm the only one of the only ones that I do. I don't just do immigration work. I do criminal work. I do civil work as well. So.
Oh, very good. We have Mr. E is going to come on with us. In the meantime, let's reintroduce our segment. This is our immigration segment. We've been wanting John up here for the longest time to talk to us about immigration. This is attorney John VASQUEZ, and we are so excited to have him. We have pulled in co-host with Everette. Mr. E, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing wonderful, and thank you so much, John, for joining us. Man, we couldn't have never made it. That's been a topic that's out of this world that we've been battling our brain, beating our head against the wall, trying to find out what's going on, because there's so many people out there wants to know what's going on with immigration. And yes, I am so glad that we connected with you. So John, I know you are the man because you was highly recommended by a great lawyer also.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Pastor Edward. It's good to see you. It's good to see you. And thanks for having me. I appreciate being here and having a chance to talk to your audience and talk a little bit about immigration. But I'm very happy to be here. Thank you. I appreciate
it.
It's
good to put the face with the name.
Mr. E.
It's good to put the face with the name. Thank you so very, very much. Now we officially have met, John.
Yeah.
And every time we post immigration or want to discuss immigration, our numbers go up so high. Even our posts. People are really interested in immigration and what's happening. Mr. E and I discuss it a lot. We know people that are here, and a lot of times, John, I get concerned about families because there are some families that really are having a hard time, trying to figure out what's going to happen to them. Families, can you address families? How do you have clients, but do you consider, that package, mother, daughter, brother, grandma, uncles? How do you deal with the families?
That's another great question, Yolanda. And that's a big concern is, you'll have a lot of people ask about family separation, what happens to families. And the immigration laws do deal with specifics on there's certain cases, like we'll have, the cases become so complex because a lot of times one family member will come, like a parent will come by themselves, and then the mother will come like 6 months later, and maybe the kids come by themselves and they cross the border by themselves, and they qualify for a whole host of different remedies if they're considered unaccompanied minors. Because you see, you might have unaccompanied minors that cross the border and their parents pick them up, but they're considered unaccompanied, and there's remedies available, but now they're reunified with their parent. They're unified. They've been reunified with their parents. So, but one of the things is if you and one more thing on that is it depends on ages too. Like maybe you have a child who comes with you. Maybe he's your son and he's 21 and he lives at home and y'all cross together, but he's 21. He's a different case technically. You might be able to adjudicate the case together, but he could, officially he's a separate case. And then, there's things we can do to mitigate that on the adjudication side, where we'll do motions to combine cases. We'll ask the court to hear cases together. But the question is that what happens if mom is deported and she has 2 kids, or if her kids are citizens or things like that? And that is a loaded question that I would give you the standard attorney answer, and it's just, it depends, right?
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
so I will tell you this just real quick. When cases go to the immigration court, so the immigration court, the closest one that I deal with is Annandale, the Annandale Immigration Court. We go up there and we do those cases in person. I've done a couple via just like this on WebEx. But we'll go up to Annandale, Virginia for those cases. And when those cases are over, if the judge denies an asylum application, my clients, there's not an ICE agent waiting to take them into custody.
Wow.
When we're done, the judge will say, okay, you have 30 days to deport yourself. If they give the decision on the spot, sometimes they'll wait a few days, they'll publish it, they'll send it. But basically the immigrant has about 30 days to deport themselves.
Yes.
That's pretty much it. And so many of them don't. Now, my clients will say, what should I do? I said, you should follow the law. The judge just said that you have to deport yourself. Now they have to make that decision, what they want to do. Now that they can appeal it. And, we appeal, if they decide to appeal, that goes to the Board of Immigration Appeals. As soon as we file a notice of appeal, which they have to do within 30 days, and the board accepts their appeal and says, okay, we'll hear the appeal, they automatically get a stay of deportation until their hearing is done. And that could take several years. So there is a process. We do go up to court, but nothing happens to them usually afterward. Now that's the Annandale Immigration Court, the one I'm used to dealing with.
Yeah.
So there's no, they're not taken into custody right after that. Usually they're just told, hey, you have 30 days to leave. So families, sometimes if maybe mom is ordered deported and she has 2 kids, most of the time, they're going to do whatever they think is right for their family. Now I think you saw a case the other day where mom was deported.
Yes.
And the 2 kids were U.S. citizens.
Yes.
I think what happened is the mom was deported, and of course the parent made the choice, I'm going to take my kids with me. I have cases where a family, I've had cases where the father's being deported, the mother's staying, and the son is a U.S. citizen.
Wow.
The father has to say, the father, what are you going to do? He said, well, my kid's a U.S. citizen. He's here. He's thriving in school. My wife has a job. I'm leaving. We'll figure it out. And then he got deported. Now he was detained, and it goes back to how he had some criminal issues. So it's kind of like,
yes,
it was really not a lot we could do for him. He had multiple criminal convictions. So he was already detained when the hearing was over. So there wasn't much we can do. He didn't have an option of just staying.
yes.
But a lot of times it comes down to a choice. Are you going to, if you're deported, are you going to take your family members with you that don't have to go? Or are you going to take those family members that have never been adjudicated? There's so many different scenarios. Hey, mom is not a citizen, but the son is a citizen. He was born here. Mom's a citizen. She has an immigration case. Son is here, doesn't have any case.
Yes.
Technically he's not legal, but he's not on that deportation order. So it's so much of it depends. And I would say that a lot of immigrants, and I don't tell them to do this, but they'll receive a deportation order, but a lot of them will kind of lay low and stay. I always tell them, hey, you have to follow the law, and they have to make a decision. But that happens. But normally the families are going to do what they think is best. And that's an extreme example. They said the mom was deported, and I think it was a criminal issue. And I don't want to speak out of place because I wasn't following it that close.
Yes.
But a lot of times that's a decision that they make.
John, I'm so glad that you're addressing that, because there's a lot of family members today that are really freaking out. They're afraid. They don't know what's their next move, don't know what to do. Because if dad and mom is, especially the children, if dad and mom is deported back to their hometowns, let's say, for example, El Salvador, the children are freaking out because they don't know anything about El Salvador, and they don't want to split. Mom go to this detention center, dad go to this one, and the children go to a detention center and they don't be connected again. What do they do?
Well, it's a challenge for immigration officials to try to deal with that. And then as a lawyer, I try to work with with prosecutors a lot of times on family issues like that. So I'll give you an example. I have a client who, she doesn't really have an immigration remedy, but her children do. Her children have a path to what's called a juvenile visa because they went through a lot of hardship. Their father abandoned the family, so they had an immigration remedy. So the prosecutor agreed actually to dismiss the case of the mother, even though she really had no remedy.
Yeah.
She had an asylum case. It was not a very good asylum case. The prosecutor said, "Hey, we'd be willing to." I said, I asked her, and then she came back and said, "Hey, we'd be willing to dismiss. Would you agree?" Now, what does that do for mom? It puts her in this kind of this limbo
Yes.
where she doesn't have a remedy, but at the same time, she doesn't have a deportation over her head. Now, the court can open up that case anytime they want. They can reopen it, and that has happened. But in the interim, mom has kind of a quasi legal status because the court has dismissed her case. And really, it's because they kind of look at it and say, okay, we've got 4 kids here that have a path to,
Yeah.
one of them's a citizen and 3 of them have a path to a visa. Are we really going to deport single mom? And so they dismissed the case. Now, the case has not been reopened, but it could be. The court does have that, the prosecutors do have that option to petition the court and ask them to reopen. So family separation is a tough one, but I would say this, that, and I don't, I don't always try to defend the other side, but I will say most of the prosecutors that I've worked with, I call it the ACCs, the assistant chief counsels, most of them, they'll try to work with you. They try to look at it from a realistic perspective. And a lot of times they will sympathize as well and say, hey, what's a solution that everybody's happy with? Sometimes they've got to, there's nothing much they can do. I mean, we see that in criminal cases too, where if there's a criminal offense, a criminal offense is a criminal offense. But I have seen prosecutors, immigration, the ACCs, have tried to work with us and come up with some type of solution, like maybe dismiss a case, administratively close a case that kind of helps the family. But it is tough. But I do see that. I deal with it more when I have cases like that where mom has a case but the kids don't have a case or something like that. When they got to make that decision, hey, do we want to join the kids to the case? Or the mom sometimes like, hey, keep them out of it. If I get deported, I get deported, or at least I have an order of deportation to try to protect the kids. And I would say this, there are remedies for kids.
Yes.
Where it has a caveat. There can never be the children can never petition the parent, because they don't want to create that incentive. But a lot of parents are like, hey, I'm okay with that. They really sacrifice themselves for their kids. So.
Absolutely.
Wow.
I want to know about some of your success stories. What are some of the cases that you worked on and it just went absolutely fabulous, your way, their way, and you feel good about?
Sure. Well, I will say, unfortunately, we, as defense lawyers, as my boss tells me, because my boss has been a criminal defense attorney for almost 40 years, and he said, hey, sometimes we lose a lot, because we're going up against the government, and sometimes I have found, especially as a Marine, sometimes it can be very disheartening. We get these decisions that, even though sometimes I know deep down it's probably maybe the right decision, the judge made a tough decision. That can be disheartening, but when you do get a win, it's a great feeling. And I've had, one client had been here for years and had worked hard, raised his family. His kids were citizens, and then he got in trouble with the law. One mistake, just one mistake. One night, had a few too many drinks, decided to get behind the wheel. Thankfully, nobody got hurt, but he was picked up. No contact with immigration, no contact with Border Patrol, anybody. Now he had contact with the Virginia Beach Police Department. He went to jail, got out, and ICE was waiting for him. Next thing you know, he's all the way in Pennsylvania.
Yes.
And long story short, we were able to get him out. We had his hearing, and we were able to show that, there's certain requirements for the remedy that he was available with. And I will tell you that the immigration judge, before he retained me, even told him, hey, I think you're a good candidate for this remedy. So here you had a judge. A lot of the judges have a tough job because the laws are very, they're tough.
Yes.
The laws are specific, but a lot of them are very compassionate. I mean, I've seen so many judges say, "I'm so sorry for what happened to you, and I'm very sorry, but I'm sorry you just don't meet the statutory requirements for this remedy." Well, in this case, the judge just grilled my client,
Mm-hmm.
and so did the prosecutor. And then to the point where we didn't finish, so we had to come back for another hearing. And when it was all said and done, the judge finally said, "Okay," and we got kind of a win to where it's not an outright win, but we
Yeah.
know in the long run it will be. So my client was super ecstatic, and a lot of work went into that case, a lot of time, a lot of effort. It was such a good feeling to see that, and to see that knowing his family wasn't going to have to worry about that. I'd say there are a lot of short-term wins. I've had clients, when I give them their work permit, they cry, because now they could work, I can work legally. I've got a work permit. I've got a social security card, social security number. They feel really good about that. There's some short-term wins on that. And some of the family petitions are, they're good feelings. I always tell my clients, there's only one reason you should get married, and you should get married for love. And I said, now it helps if you marry an American citizen, but it only should, we only get married for one reason. That's for love. And so to see families come in, and I mean, I've had families come in and they've been married for years with kids and everything. And now they're like, okay, we want to
Oh,
apply
wow.
for
That is
family
amazing.
petition. So those are great. It's a good feeling to help people. And I will say on the criminal side, I deal with people that made just one mistake, and they end up in issues like that. And sometimes they're traffic stuff, but it's stuff that could be, doesn't look good on their record, and to go over there and get a win in criminal court is always a good feeling, because everybody makes mistakes. And there's some really good judges we have here, especially in Norfolk. That Virginia Beach, Norfolk. The judges are especially at the general district court level, Portsmouth, I've seen them all over. There's a lot of really good, very compassionate judges, and I've been really, really impressed on the criminal side, and how judges will actually bend over backwards to try to help people.
Now, what happens to a person once the police pull them over, and they pull them over for traffic violation, and they run their information and find out that they're not a citizen, find out that their green card has expired? What happens? They've been living here for a long time. What's next?
Well, I would say, Pastor Everett, that what normally happens, like on a traffic stop, at least in this area, and I would say everywhere that I deal with, and I do criminal cases, traffic cases from Virginia Beach all the way up to Isle of Wight, to Williamsburg, New Kent. I've even done a couple criminal. I've done a traffic case up in Loudoun County. We don't normally go past Richmond, but we've been kind of all over the southeastern part of Virginia. And I will tell you this, that I have yet to run into a police officer that when they stop them, I've never seen them ask for their immigration status. Now they'll ask them for their driver's license, the registration, the normal stuff. And then so many of my clients, they don't have a driver's license. And I'm not sure if you were on, but Virginia is one of only 30, I think it's 31 states that allows immigrants to get a driver's license.
Wow.
And so I tell them, take advantage of that. But if they don't have a driver's license, because a lot of times they're pulled over for speeding, or, not having have an expired registration, have an expired inspection sticker, whatever it might be. And that's where it usually comes out. Okay, they don't speak English. That's usually the biggest hurdle for the police officer. He's got to call another police officer that either speaks Spanish, or he'll use Google Translate. I've seen a lot of that. Now that brings up a lot of constitutional issues. Can you do a sobriety test with Google Translate? I would argue no, things like that. But the police officers, believe it or not, they do their best to try to get somebody, but they make mistakes sometimes. But I have yet to see anybody say, oh, he's an immigrant, or he's illegal. He doesn't have a green card. He's not a citizen. He doesn't have anything. Let's call ICE. That usually happens in the jail. And that usually doesn't happen until they've actually been adjudicated, and then they got to serve their sentence. So usually for a DUI, for example, it may change, but usually, they're arraigned and they'll be maybe released the next day on their own recognizance. Then if it's an enhanced DUI, or what we call aggravated DUI, and there's a mandatory jail sentence, that's when they go back in. That's usually when we see ICE. There might be a detainer on one of them. But as far as from in this area, in local, I'd say Hampton Roads, haven't seen any police officers inquiring about immigration status. They don't have that mandate as far as I know.
Why is El Salvador such a hard place for the people to go back to? Why is, a lot of folks say they don't want to go back to Honduras. They don't want to go back to El Salvador. They don't want, what's wrong with El Salvador?
Well, it's a great point to make about Central America and El Salvador, and specific in Honduras. And then I'm going to put my Marine hat back on. When I used to work with the security forces in Central America and South America, and primarily what we were doing down there was, counter drug stuff. Now we weren't doing it. Now, I was a Marine grunt. I was an infantry guy. We would teach them small unit tactics and stuff like that, infantry type stuff. But we wanted to make them a better police force and a better security force to try to, to do better drug interdiction, really to benefit us, right? Because the consumer is up north. And so, in a nutshell, you have the producers in South America, and I don't want to, not to give a big drug view, and I'm certainly not the expert, but basically the producers in South America, the consumers in North America, and what's between that is really you had Central America, and really the security force, the security force elements in those countries really couldn't handle that level of illicit trafficking, moving up. And a lot of times, they would get it to Central America, and the easiest way to get it up into the U.S. was to drive it through, get it into Central America, drive it up to Mexico. But, I'm not an expert in that, and I've been out of that for a while. But what's happened is you had a lot of trafficking. You had, all kinds of stuff going through these countries. And then on top of that, you had the gang problem. And I will say that MS-13 was formed in Los Angeles. It wasn't formed in El Salvador, and you can go back to the Salvadorian Civil War, where we deported a lot, where a lot of Salvadorians migrated to Los Angeles, to California. And when the Civil War ended in 1992, I believe, a lot of them were deported back. You deported a lot of kids, Salvadorians back, who had very little knowledge of Spanish or the country. They formed actually gangs in the U.S. and brought those gangs back to Central America. Mm-hmm. Now, El Salvador was the murder capital of the world. And I can tell you, I saw the two major prisons in El Salvador. One was down, if you will, the country's kind of like this, but one was towards the south east, and one was towards the northwest. And one was run by MS-13. The other one was run by 18th Street or Calle 18. And that was no way to run a prison system. So eventually, that president, he said, hey, I need a new prison. I need to build this supermax. And I think the people were at a point where they couldn't take it anymore. And the gangs had become so bad. Wow. And the violence was so bad that they started, that they really cracked down. Now, we'll tell you, some people say it's gone too far. Now, you can get put in jail for anything. And are there due process issues? Are there, human rights issues? Yeah, sure. I can't, and I can't give you specific examples. I do know a lot of Salvadorians that are very happy with the security situation. Now, we'll say this, that Honduras, Guatemala, those other countries, they're not the same. People might think they are, but Honduras is so much bigger. El Salvador is really small. Wow. And it's different too. It's kind of along the coast, where Honduras touches both coasts, Guatemala touches both coasts. So they're all different, but basically they've become such a hub of trafficking, human trafficking, drug trafficking, and the security forces there, the police could not handle it. The military could not handle it. And that's why they became such, crime was so bad there. They call it the triangle in Central America. So that's kind of an overview of what's happened. But in El Salvador, the dramatic change has been just to clamp down. The war on the gangs has finally really shown results, to where, I think just being in a gang was almost illegal. And they've done some, the president has pulled some, he's used some loopholes in the Constitution to, he's taken some liberties too, I would say. But El Salvador has changed so much that it's interesting that the cities now are safer. They say it's the safest country in the Western Hemisphere. But if you're in that mega prison there, that's what's getting all the attention, is people, hey, being detained there. I have never seen it in person. Like I said, I saw the old prisons. We got a quick tour of them. It was not a pretty sight, but I think that's part of it, and part of it is the agreement too. You've seen that, hey, they've agreed to accept some detainees and to house them in their prisons. I think I'm sure they're charging us something to do that, because some countries won't accept our detainees. Like I've had clients from Cuba that they have deportation orders and they can't be deported because Cuba won't accept them. So I think it's just so complex. It's one of those.
Absolutely.
Every country is completely different, but El Salvador is so different now and changed that it's gotten a lot of attention lately.
Now, I would like to know, let's see, someone has a question. Are immigration laws changing? And who's responsible for changing the law, if they can be changed, immigration laws?
It's a great question, and I talked a little bit about immigration law. It's called administrative law, and to put it in a nutshell, basically the law says one thing, and that's okay, and the executive branch is responsible for enforcing it. The Congress writes the law, and the executive enforces it. How the executive enforces it is they write these regulations that help to enforce the law. The regulations can change. And that's where we get changes where people say, okay, the law really hasn't changed. That's true. But the mechanism of enforcing the law has changed. And I use an example of on certain forms, when you're applying for a visa, there might be a question called a public charge question. You say, okay, do you think you're going to be using public benefits like, Medicaid or SNAP or anything like that in the next 5 years? If you come to the US, you say, yeah, I'm going to probably need some help in the first 5 years. Well, that if that question is on the application, that might be a reason for them to deny the application just on that. Hey, is this person a public charge for the first 5 years they're in the US? Yes. Okay, their application's been denied. New administration comes in, that one question is removed. You didn't change the law, but you really did. You just opened the door up for so many more people, or you closed the door for so many people. So that's a way administratively by changing the law, but you didn't really change the law. So I think the EPA is a good example. It's like, okay, we want clean water. Okay, what's your definition of clean water? Well, the administrative agency, they'll tell you what the clean water is. It might be, this, or it might be this. We still want clean water, but it's whatever the regulation says is clean water. I know it's a very simple kind of rudimentary example, but that's how immigration law is too. Here's the law. How are we going to enforce it? Well, we can kind of change the way we enforce it by changing the regulations. So that's kind of how it changes.
It's just similar to a catch-22, right?
It can be, yeah.
Catch-22. I want to thank you so much, John, for your service, man. I didn't know bad on you that you was a Marine Corps, but you looking at an Army man here. Thank you so very, very much.
Army and the Marines.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So, John, tell us what advice would you have if you would sit down with a crowd of people, immigrants, or people are seeking asylum, or just American citizens? What advice would you give us all?
Well, for immigrants, from a practical perspective that hits home, is I would say, please, drive the speed limit, don't drink and drive, because those things are what get my clients in trouble. For the most part, don't fight in the family. I've had cases where, sister called the police on another sister. They're both illegal. And then when I met with, when I had to have a meeting with the one on the other side, I said, you realize that if you win this case, your sister will go to jail and she'll get deported. Oh, I didn't know that. So I would say, one, try to obey the law, so, I think that's probably, from a practical perspective. Another thing is I tell my clients, and I say, live your life, be a part of the community. You kind of want to lay low, but that doesn't mean, you go get if you're working, work. Now that things might change, and your employer will let you know. A lot of times the employers are the ones that are going to kind of, they're the ones that are going to be responsible. But I tell people, hey, live your life, be a part of your community, Send your kids to school. They have a right to that. But, try to stay out of trouble, be a good neighbor, all those things that, just, it sounds kind of corny, but be a good citizen, and then for people that are not immigrants, the same, they're, our immigrants, they're part of our community, the ones that are criminals. Okay, let's adjudicate them. And if there's a penalty, if they should be deported, then let's do that, but let's follow the law. The laws are there. There were smart people that wrote the laws, but let's follow them. But I would say, be good citizens. Everybody here wants the same thing. And, so many of my clients, they just want the opportunity. They want to come here and they want to work. So I agree with some things. I say, hey, the laws should be enforced. And I tell my clients, hey, that's, we have laws for a reason. But I'd say, let's, follow the law, live your life, enjoy being in the greatest country in the world. I will tell you that going back to my Marine experience is that, I worked a lot with Marine Corps, and they call them naval infantry in Central and South America. But, the Salvadorians, the Salvadorian army and the Salvadorian Marines, they were in Iraq until the very end. Wow. They were in Afghanistan until the very end. They're a tiny country in Central America, and they sent these, battalion companies and battalions to Iraq for us, to support us. And so they've been a friend. And, I kind of look at it that perspective. And I remember going down there with my Marines and working with Salvadorian Marines, and they were just like us, that they were just Salvadorian. They were typical Marines, and the soldiers were very professional. They just don't have the resources that we have, but they're very patriotic. They want the same things that we do. And so, I got a level of respect that I learned from dealing with foreign countries and dealing with foreign, and it's easy for me because I'm, my family's from Cuba, my wife is Salvadorian, it was easy, but whether it was South America or Central America, but it gave me an appreciation for that. And also going over there, all these countries gave me appreciation for this country. Absolutely. And how great it is. With all our flaws, we're still the greatest country.
Why they attack so much?
Go ahead, Missy.
Why the attack, John, so much, Attorney John? Why the attack is so much on Hispanic? Why not they're making a big stink out of other immigrants?
I think, Pastor Everett, it's probably because of the volume, just because of the proximity, of Latin America, and it's, for a Latino, and it's not easy. Don't get me wrong, it's not easy. Just think mentally to make that decision to just give up everything in your home country, everything and how desperate that person might be to go and try to come to the U.S. from Central America or South America. So I think the proximity of it is just the volume of it. That's why we see so many, Latinos here in this country. I had a client from Ghana, and to hear what he went through to get to the U.S. was amazing, and just now you have an ocean to cross, and he had an ocean and a continent to cross because he had to find, he went to a country that would allow him to get a visa. So he made it to South America. And he had been persecuted. He had been beat up, stabbed, and everything because of he was a member of a particular social group. And he made it all the way from Ghana to South America, Central America, just to read his, his journey was truly amazing. But it's the volume, Pastor. I think that's the thing. You see so many, Latinos and anywhere. I mean, when I was a kid here, I think we were the only Cubans in the entire, Hampton Roads area.
Wow.
There was a few. We had the Spanish American Club. This was back in the 70s and 80s. But now, I mean, you can go to certain parts and everybody speaks Spanish, so, but it's a great question, but I think it's the proximity. But I will say too, outside this area, there's just huge communities in different parts. Of course, in Miami, you have Cubans, and there's certain Cuban communities up in New York and New Jersey. And then you have Chicago has Mexicans, and there's Mexicans in Northern Virginia, and there's Polish communities. And I think Chicago, I mean, there's a lot, there's an amazing array of different communities that concentrate in certain areas, but Latinos were so used to seeing, because I think it's really the proximity, and
Absolutely.
I wouldn't call it easy, but it's definitely easier from somebody in Latin America to try to come here.
But we want to say thank you so much, Attorney VASQUEZ, for being on FYI After Dark. I'm going to get those numbers to you. I assure you, people are going to be looking. They're looking now, but after we finish, I'm sure the numbers are going to go up. If there's any information you would give about websites, how people can learn more about immigration or your firm, or any information that you want to give, you can give that now.
Sure. Yeah. Our law firm it's Protogiro Law, which is funny because my boss, Andy Protogiro, he's originally his family's from Greek, but he's from Norfolk. He grew up in Norfolk.
Yeah,
So he's got a little bit of a Southern twang, but he speaks perfect Greek.
that's
So,
marvelous.
um, but anyway, I mean, he's just a force in the defense as a defense attorney. And he's also a very close friend of mine. So his firm's here. We do criminal defense, we do immigration, we do some civil work, but primarily we work on defense. But again, it's Protogiro Law. It's funny because a lot of my clients can't pronounce Protogiro. A lot of Spanish people just cannot say that. And we are in Norfolk, but we do cases all in the Hampton Roads area. We do, and if it's something important, we can go a little bit beyond. We actually have an attorney who's licensed in North Carolina, and we do have a website. I think it's protogiro.org, I believe. But if you Google Protogiro law firm, you'll see us there with our criminal defense attorneys. And we're always here. You can give us a call and we can set up a consult if you got any questions. Like I said, Andy, and he's 40 years practicing here, and no, we'll be happy to hear from you, and stop by and see us. We're right there. We're right across from the courthouse in Norfolk.
Just before you go, I got some of my great friends on, and Francisco Morales. He's on also, and if he has any questions, give him a telephone number, give him some information that just in case he might want to contact you with some situations he might have to deal with,
Sure.
about this immigration matter, because he's got some beautiful children, and they're my family. They're close to me like never before, and these are where the inquiry minds come into place. Their children are very inquisitive. They're very curious. And what could happen to my family, because they don't want to see their family destroyed.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it's a big concern. Our number here, he can call. Our number is 757-625-1775. And actually, anybody that calls, if you don't speak English, that's fine. We have our receptionist. Her name is Carmen Alegria, and she speaks Spanish and she speaks English. And she's here every day. So Carmen Alegria, she'll take your call, and she can, whether you only speak Spanish, and she can direct you. I'm, John VASQUEZ. I'm always here. I, obviously speak Spanish. I speak a little Portuguese, but I've lost a lot of it since I got out of the Marine Corps. And then my paralegal and legal assistant is Jonathan Lopez. He's my paralegal, and he's also here, and he also speaks Spanish. So you've got, and then actually I've got Gigi Algarin, who's upstairs. She works upstairs, but she's also paralegal, and she is an extraordinary paralegal. She primarily does criminal, but she speaks Spanish, so she can help you as well. So we've got, I think, 4 Spanish speakers in the building that you can talk to. And then, of course, we've got Andy that speaks Greek. We've actually got Colby who speaks German. So we've got a bunch of languages covered here.
Wow. Look, we're going to let you go, but I want to ask you one thing before you leave. What do you do for leisure? Are you a sports fan? We do Monday sports talk. And John, I know you do something sometime beside this great work that you're doing.
Well, I'm a homebody. I'm a sucker for my kids, although I call them my kids. They're 27 and 22, and everybody's like, they're not kids. I was like, I can't help it. So pretty much a homebody. I love the beach. I live very close to the beach. My wife and I love going out there, going for walks. I'm a sports nut. So,
Really?
and I love my teams. I love, the Dolphins, the Marlins,
Yes.
and the Heat. It's been a tough couple of years, although my Heat made the finals at some, but they can't close the deal. But I tell you what, I went to VMI, and it was tough at VMI being a football fan. Oh my gosh.
Tell them to take their hat off.
And so, but when I went to Miami, it was a great change, because once I went to the U, then it was nice to have a real football team. But I'm trying not to look at Pastor Everett's
I
helmet
know.
because one of my best friends,
Listen.
he's a huge Dallas Cowboy fan. So anytime I see something negative on the Cowboys, I send it to him. But I can't wait for this season. Hopefully Tua can be healthy for the season. But
Absolutely.
I love my sports. I love that. And I love actually wrestling, amateur wrestling. I was a big
Oh
wrestler in high
Lord, that
school
one too.
and then
Listen.
wrestled in college. So I still follow that a lot, but I love my sports and I like the beach and, just being outside. And of course, love being with my kids, even though they're not really kids anymore.
Well,
NBA
thank you
is
so
on.
much, for
NBA is
being
on.
on.
What's your prediction?
For who?
For what now?
NBA is on. Who's gonna win who's gonna win the whole tournament?
I think it's gonna be Boston and Minnesota.
All right, Mr. E. Who
Because
did you hear that from?
and I think Boston will win it again. The reason I say Minnesota is because they play defense.
Okay.
Well, have you seen OKC play yet?
I don't know. I don't know. I just Minnesota was so good last year, and they were young, and now they're playing. I just think they're gonna slide in there. I mean, was it Anthony Edwards? He's unbelievable. But with what's the guy, Rudy Gobert? Just the defense. I think defense wins it. Last year I knew Dallas wouldn't do anything because they never played defense. They got lucky and made the finals. But I think it's going to be Boston and Minnesota. Although I don't really care for either team. So,
well, since you said that, I'm looking for the Golden State Warriors to beat the Minnesota Timberwolves, and I'm looking for Denver to lose to the OKC. So my prediction to be in the playoff, the Indiana Pacers going to beat the Cavaliers, and the Celtics going to lose to the New York Knicks.
Really?
We shall see. John, thank you so much for being on, and we look forward to talking with you again. We want you to have a wonderful, wonderful evening.
Thank you so much. And you should start, Pastor Everett, you should start a sports talk show. There, I'd come on every night if you needed me to.
I do. We do have a sports show. What are you doing Monday?
You said sports, or you said sports or support?
Sports.
Do you really? Can you tell us about it real quick?
What are you doing Monday?
Oh, no, I was asking Pastor Edward if he had a show, then I'd be happy to be on that.
I got you.
Would you?
What are you doing Monday?
Mondays. During the day?
Yeah, 9:30 to 10.
Oh, I'll have to write that. I'm always here. If I'm not in court. Usually I'm court. Courts usually go in the morning. Depends. Like tomorrow morning, I have a hearing at 8:30, and then traffic court. Traffic court always goes in the morning. Criminal court usually in the morning. So, but yeah, if I don't have it, I'd love to listen in and maybe make a couple comments.
And we can always have you on our After Dark.
9:30 to 10. I want you to be my guest.
What day is that?
9:30 to 10 on Monday in the morning. Write it down. And see, I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan and you're a Miami fan, right? Now, that's bad on your behalf because you're a Miami fan.
All right.
I mean, the Dolphins haven't done anything since Billy White Shoe Johnson.
Well, there's a new season coming, right? Absolutely.
Hey, I'm a Cuban kid. I gotta love the Dolphins.
I would think you would play. I would think you would playing soccer. I think you'd be playing. You don't play soccer?
No, never. No, my dad. I mean, baseball was king in Cuba, and so my dad loved baseball. And we didn't. I mean, when I was a kid here, growing up here in Norfolk, soccer. My kids played it, but nobody really. It wasn't really as popular. And so I played tackle football all the way up until high school. I got just destroyed. I wasn't very good, but that's all I knew.
So, what high school?
I went to Norfolk Catholic, the old Norfolk Catholic.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, my older brother and sister went to Norview, and then I have a twin brother, and we both went to Norfolk Catholic. I went to Crossroads Elementary School, and then Holy Trinity, and then Norfolk Catholic. My sister and brother were at Norview, and
I'm a Commodore.
That's what is that, Maury?
That's Maury High School.
Maury Commodores.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we want to thank you again, and we will talk to you soon. Glad that you have accepted our invitation to come back, and we want you to have a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And thank you to all your listeners and viewers. And I hope you have a great evening. And I'm happy to come back. Talk
And
immigration
anything,
or sports.
and anything we can do anything for you. If you got something burning and you want to just jump in with us, let us know. Let us know, and we'll make room for you, John.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank
Thank
you so
you,
much.
sir.
Have a good night.
Good
Have
night.
a good one. Bye now.
Yeah, so wow, what a great conversation. Our special guest, Attorney John VASQUEZ. And talking about immigration, I think he kind of put my mind at ease about a lot of things, Mr. E. Um, I hope that those that are listening will contact him if they need to, but also, really kind of get away from the media and find out the facts and find out what's going on in your city, your state, and see what you can do to make sure you keep your families safe and to stay informed and knowledgeable about the laws and how, they affect us and you. So before we go, of course, we want you all to join us on Wednesday. We are hosts of FYI Radio Morning Show Live. We come on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 9:30 a.m. And we are going to have a great show. We're going to have our issues concerning men on Wednesdays. We have a fun Friday show, issues concerning women.
Yes.
We also do sports talk. And did you hear John say that he is a sports buff? I
Yes.
said to myself, this is absolutely fabulous. So we can expect him to be a part of our immigration segment and our sports talk sometime. He can come on and really go toe to toe with Mr. E. That would be just fabulous. So, of course, we're going to talk about mothers on Wednesday and how men feel about their mothers. And then we'll come back on Fun Friday and just give a different spin on women and mothers and being mothers and the joy of motherhood. And I know it's going to be absolutely wonderful. So we will see you. Of course, we're covering Monday Sports Talk, NBA playoffs. And don't forget, on FYI After Dark on Mondays at 6 p.m., we'll be covering hot topics. And Mr. E is going to come with Around the Town, what's happening in the community in the 757. Looking forward to that as well. Don't forget to visit our sponsors, Bulvic Academy, BULVIC, and also Beard Gods, BEARDGODZ. The owner is Chris Hinton of Beard Gods. And go check out all the products and things that are there. Also, follow us on social media. We need to have you all be a part of what we're doing, be a part of the dialogue. Make sure you're asking questions or being a part of our panel discussion. We want to see more faces up here, Mr. E.
That's right.
Your face, my face, and others on this platform, giving their spin on whether it's relationships or if it's, talking about children, family, or, any given subject. We would love to have other faces up here with their opinions or questions. So don't forget, follow us on social media. You can go to YouTube at Cristo Records 1, CRISTO Records 1, or you can go to at FYI Radio Show host Yolanda Hinton, and you can also subscribe there. So listen, you could be a special guest, intern, or sponsor. Mr. E is going to serve that.
If you'd like to be a special guest, intern, or sponsor on the most talked about radio show in the whole wide world, all you have to do is give us a call at 757-714-7861, or you can inbox us at Edward Everett's Facebook page, Miss Yolanda Lady Hinton Facebook page, or FYI Facebook page, or you can email us at FYIRadiosHowLive@gmail.com. If you email us, we'll email you back and have you as a special audience. All you gotta do is send us your email. We'll email you back and let you know what date and time and that we would like to have you as our audience. Don't forget to join us on WPCE 1400, WGPL 1350 Peace 95.3, WMVA 88.9 FM, and all social media platforms. And if you want to hear us all over the world, all you have to do is go to 1400 AM, 1350 AM, look for Church Webcast. And when you see Church Webcast, click and listen live.
Thank you all again. We will see you on Wednesdays, 9:30. This Wednesday, 9:30, great show. And we look to see you there. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Go look at some of the games.
That's right.
And we'll meet you on Monday Sports Talk to talk about what's going on with the NBA playoffs. Mr. E, you have a great evening. And thank you so much for bringing yourself here and being a part of the dialogue.
2 up, 2 down, yeah.